All right, we're live on the socials, and there's Brian right there. We'll pull him in here in a moment once I get you guys on.
All right.
We're live in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050, WTKA, online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Matt the Miz Mizler in the studio, and the roundtable crew is with us from MGoBlog.com. Glad to have the fellas. The boys are back in town, if you've ever seen 48 Hours, right? With one Mr. Brian Cook. Brian, how are you this morning?
Hello. Well, good.
Mr.
Hi.
Mr. Craig Ross, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. If you recall, The Boys Are Back in Town, I think, is a song by the Bus Boys. The only maybe, or one of the only black punk groups. They're phenomenal. If people don't know the Bus Boys, Minimum Wage Rock and Roll, one of the best all-time rock and roll albums.
Craig Ross is told he remembers the bubonic plague.
Thanks.
We had Scars on earlier this week, as a matter of fact. And one Mr. Seth Fisher. Seth, how are you?
I'm a little tired. The phone books are here. The new rosters came out last night, so I was up till 2 a.m. comparing weights and making sure that I got every single little change and noted them down. So we'll have that article later today, and you'll get to see how much the Michigan football program has gained good weight and lost their bad weight.
Gotcha. All right. So, fellas, I want to start off first talking about the Wilmer Hale report, which has been covered at length, multiple publications already. And the thing that's caught me most by surprise was the report that this has been on the desk of Ward Manuel since May. I found that very surprising. What it suggests is that that there is the certainty that I had about the future evaporated because you had plenty of time to sort of assess the details that were in the report in a way that would let you know if you thought for sure that you can move past them, we would have had the word of the extension already. We have not gotten word of the extension. That doesn't mean one won't come, Brian Cook, but the fact that one hasn't come with the report having been in the possession of the administration for 3 months suggests that the future is in serious doubt.
Well, and honestly, this is the strangest thing I've come across. Like, there's usual cover-up kind of stuff, right? And that makes sense from a self-interested point of view. But here's a hockey coach who's out of contract, who you have this report on, and you don't do anything for 3 months. Like, I get a week or two to like get everybody's ducks in a row and figure out what you're going to do. But this has been a summer-long open question, and it just doesn't make any sense to me, unless you're trying to bring Pearson back. But I don't see how you can have that report be in the public eye and do that. I also don't see how you wouldn't read the report and be like, okay, he lied to investigators repeatedly. That's not one of our values here, and he's got to go.
Yeah, I here's to me perhaps part of the answer from my point of view. I think this has been generally misrepresented in secondary reportings, and the report says, and I'm quoting, "We were charged with investigating whether it was more likely than not that Mel took retaliatory actions against Steve Shields for raising concerns that violated school policy." And the Wilmer Hale calls this, quote, a relatively narrow purview. They also go on to say we were not tasked, and this is in bold or italics, with conducting a comprehensive culture review within the hockey program. So, and the report comes back to Ward's desk in May, and Wilmer Hale concludes, no, Mel did not retaliate to get rid of Steve Shields, that he did not violate school policy. However, the report goes on to say to the athletic department, you got some investigating to do. And because we think Mel misrepresented or wasn't truthful with us on some things. B, there is at least prima facie evidence that there's a cultural problem in this program, and they outline some of these cultural problems. Then the athletic department decided to do, or contemporaneously decided to do, a survey of those willing, a supposedly anonymous survey of those willing, connected to the hockey program, about the culture in the program. Well, this did not come out well, in that approximately half, or perhaps a bit more than half, of the people surveyed said there are problems, cultural problems in this program of one sort or another. That didn't happen until sometime in June. I'm not in terms of the actual access, I believe, by the athletic department. And so it's at least plausible that the athletic department and Ward Manuel took the Wilmer Hale report seriously and said, okay, because Wilmer Hale says, hey, you guys need to investigate this. You need to investigate the cultural problems in the program. And this report, incidentally, is not particularly well written. I was fairly shocked by the level of writing and the level of coherence. I read it twice. Took me some time. But in the end, I think this is what they said was, we saw some problems, you need to investigate them. And so it could be, trying to put a potential answer to Brian's question, which is of course the right question. It could be that what the athletic department has done has been investigating. Now, my information from a good source yesterday, which I shipped over to John Bacon, and apparently others did too, was that there was a meeting yesterday between Mary Sue Coleman, who's apparently been tasked with this particular problem, not the new president, between Mary Sue Coleman, Ward Manuel, and perhaps Mel, as to, well, what are we going to do, or what should we do now? My sources, who I think are good, told me it was happening soon, that something was happening soon. So it's at least plausible that the athletic department has been doing their own investigation and their own scuffling around over the past couple of months. Now, note that a primary culprit within the program, or at least according to Wilmer Hale, retired. I don't know how long ago that was.
Yeah.
Did you hear the quotes? Everyone on the radio, did you hear the quotes around
retired? Yeah. Now, my guess is that retirement was not completely voluntary, but that's just my surmise. And there was a lot of noise in the media how this was a person who was abusive, verbally abusive, it sounds like, to female employees within the athletic department or within the hockey program. But in fact, according to two people, Brian Wiseman and Ian Hume, who's the equipment manager, no, this guy was abusive to everybody. He was abusive,
this is a lot of lawyering.
Yeah,
this isn't a lawyer situation, right? He's out of contract. You can terminate him at will.
He's an at-will employee, correct?
Right. So it doesn't matter what the legal, like how well the report is written, doesn't matter. If what's in the report is true, you have to fire him. There's like several different things that you have to fire Mel Pearson about. And these things, and so what you're saying is it might be accurate, but I don't think it's relevant. So you read the report and you fire the coach.
Well, it's relevant to one thing. I mean, because the question is, what is the athletic department doing? Why are they dithering while Rome burns? And I guess the answer to that is that's what Wilmer Hale told them to do. And they're following what. And
Wilmer
Hale did not tell him. Wilmer Hale said, "Here's the information."
Wilmer Hale is. They asked Wilmer Hale for an opinion. Wilmer Hale
they say, "Go and find us the information and put it in a report." The athletic department, their job is to make the call. Ward Manuel's job is to make the call. His job was to make the call in May when he had this report.
I
Well-
don't see how you get this report and you read it once and you don't call them up and you're like, you're fired.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well, that's not what Wilmer Hale suggested to the athletic department. Now, I'm not
saying, but
disagreeing
like,
with the conclusion.
But Wilmer Hale, okay, fine. You see the report, and I read the report, and it says fire me in 7 different places, and I don't understand
hard to deny that. It's hard to
Ward
deny
Manuel isn't on the same page.
I don't know. I guess he'll have to. I'm not his representative, but
It's not a close call. You have half your program worried about being retaliated against. You have lies being told to the NCAA,
True.
lies being told about COVID, lies being told to the investigators. You have lies that were told when Michigan canceled the Western Michigan game last year. You have incontrovertible proof that Mel Pearson is not a trustworthy person. And how is he still employed at this university?
I would go back to the fact that you can't sort of you can't cherry pick the Wilmer Hale report.
I'm not cherry picking the Wilmer Hale report.
Yeah,
I'm reading it.
And
I'm coming to a
no. It trips. Brian's saying it trips. There's 7 points at least where you go, okay, that's enough to fire a guy.
I mean,
it's not
just employing this Bancroft guy is like 1980s stuff. He's abusive to everybody in the program. People are calling him out and coming to you about it, and you do absolutely nothing. That's like the Rutgers basketball coach throwing basketball players at his players, like basketballs at his players. That's not acceptable. And there's 4 or 5 other completely unacceptable things in this report. So there should be no dithering. Well, it's not a close call.
I disagree. I don't disagree with the conclusion. I mean, if you ask me, the Wilmer Hale report probably or certainly sufficient to terminate or to let the contract expire. 2, I mean, I don't disagree with that. But I do think if you're going to hire Wilmer Hale and ask them for their recommendations, and you're going to take some of their recommendations seriously, you should take them all seriously. And in this case, they didn't say, oh, there's a problem in the hockey culture that he should be fired for. They said, no, these are problems that we uncovered, and you better start investigating whether what we see is in fact the case, because from the Wilmer Hale report, this is ancillary fallout.
So a couple of things let's try to frame this up. I think we can infer a few items. Number one, the mistreatment of employees, specifically women, they're clearly putting that at Bancroft's feet, right? And while there's some accountability for Mel as the coach, as the person in charge of the program, they must have determined already that alone that doesn't rise to a fireable offense, because you know that this mistreatment happened.
Yep.
Enough to where a longtime program member shouldn't be with the program anymore. He's essentially fired, and yet Mel is still being. So they must have determined that is not a fireable offense. Move on to the Strauss-Mann part. The Strauss-Mann part where, although he declined to participate in the investigation, apparently, allegedly, supposedly, pressure was brought to bear because he was raising issues. He was throwing up red flags about things in the program that Mel supposedly told him, you know what, your status with this program is in jeopardy, essentially pushing him out. Mel didn't recall or didn't recall that conversation. Everyone else that they interviewed did, and apparently there are even recordings of this. That is incontrovertible proof, as Brian said, of some dishonesty. They must have determined that in and of itself is not a fireable offense, even with what we just heard about the Bancroft issue, right? That he didn't do anything about it. Those two things together, not a fireable offense, which leads us to this culture thing. And this is the part that is hardest for me to reconcile. Clearly, from Strauss-Mann, Steve Shields, to Strauss-Mann, to many members of the senior class at that time, if not every member. I've seen reports that said it was every member of the senior class, and others said it was a good number of seniors who said that there is a culture issue. There is one to a certain degree, but the part that I can't reconcile, when you have all those first round picks, all those guys who have a choice to, they don't have to transfer, they could just go to the NHL, and all those guys came back. I can't reconcile the huge culture issue that is allegedly present on one hand with all those guys who have really clear and good options to go elsewhere and their decision to come back. And I'm curious what you guys make of that.
Well, here's what I'll let Brian speak because I've been jabbering. Go ahead.
I mean, you can have big culture problems on a hockey team, and you can also be like, I actually want to play in Yost Ice Arena, which is what Owen Power said when he came back, is like, I didn't have a real college hockey season. And they got booted from the tournament without even getting to play in it. So I think that there's balancing factors. I mean, obviously Mel Pearson is not impossible to play for, but I find the Strauss-Mann stuff to be incredibly disturbing, because that's the captain of your team and he leaves for Sweden and he's not participating in this because you've already badmouthed him, so he couldn't sign with an NHL team after a year. Like, the contents of this report, I can't reconcile the contents of the report with the kind of person that I feel should be running Michigan's hockey program.
And I feel like that's legitimate, and it's also probably public perception, and public perception is important when it comes to these sorts of things. But I still come back to the fact what Wilmer Hale did was task the athletic department to look at the culture of the program. They did that in part with their survey. And I don't know what else they did. It might have been they were completely negligent, don't see the same things that we see out of the Wilmer Hale.
It doesn't take that long to talk to all your players. If he's had that report on his desk for 3 months, he's had access to all these players. Nobody seems to have a hard time saying anything about this. There's no more excuse there, and there's no better
I just say
position to fire your coach right now. He's an at-will employee. They have other guys who can coach. I mean, Brian Wiseman just left the Islanders probably because he thinks he can get this job.
Maybe.
You've got McCult right there, and he doesn't seem to be implicated in this. You have other guys who will step up and be able to run the program. The recruiting is going fine. It's not like there's anything holding you to keep Mel. The only thing, I've tried to go with this in my head a gazillion times, what could be going on here? And the only thing I can come up with is Ward Manuel doesn't want to fire him. That I don't know if this is like some sort of connected him to Gary Moeller, even though it's a completely different situation. But whatever reason, that's the only thing I can come up with, is that Ward is convinced he wants to keep him, and everyone is telling him, no, dude, look at all of this. Because by now, the information's done. I don't think there's any more room for investigation. The report says more than enough. You've had more than enough access to these guys at this point, and you have a hockey season starting in a few months. Let's just get this done. And the only reason it hasn't been done has to be because of Ward.
It's August, right? We need to investigate this thing excuse doesn't fly anymore. You had 3 months, and you didn't even take an action. The action that happened is that the report became public. The athletic department is as of yet done nothing. They haven't even addressed it. So I don't know what they're paralyzed by indecision or what, but there's just no good explanation. Not even okay, they told us to investigate and now we're investigating. It's August. It is August. Time's up.
Well, and time may be up because from what I've heard, there's going to be an announcement in the next day or two. But I think Ward Manuel at least deserves the benefit of saying, here's what we did and here's why we did it. And I don't know, I've done this stuff for 50 years now, listening to he said, she said cases. And I'm reticent to draw conclusions based on until I get to hear what everybody said.
And it sounds like, from what you said earlier, Craig, according to your sources, it sounds like this isn't one where he makes a unilateral decision. At least that's from the sounds of it. Is that a correct interpretation?
What I heard is that it's a decision that will be made in conjunction with Mary Sue Coleman. That's what I heard. Now, it's from good sources. John heard this from other people. John Bacon heard it not just from my sources, but from other people. And so he's hearing the same thing. Now,
So why Mary Sue Coleman and not Santa Ono?
I can think of several reasons, one of which I don't want to express here. Ask me off air. But I mean, but they may just feel like, look, she has a sufficient historical connection with the program and with the athletic department that Ono does not. And that and let's not lay this first mess on his lap right now on his first, month on campus. That's my surmise, but that's just a surmise. And maybe none of it's true at all. I don't know. Maybe they'll do nothing, in which case, Brian's frustration and outrage and incest seems pretty warranted at that point. But I would like to hear, well, what's been going on? What have you been doing? What did, and it seems like those questions to Ward are fair, but I don't want to just assume that A, Ward is an idiot, or B, Ward doesn't know what he's doing, or
I don't assume either of those.
And I don't want to assume those things. I want to assume that he got the report and said, oh boy, I got a problem here. I got to deal with it.
Yeah, the biggest question which we're expressing here is what is going on in that 3-month period? What are they doing in that 3 months that weren't done? What things are they doing that weren't done during the course of investigation? They say investigate culture more. Does it take you 3 months to do just that? I don't know. I don't know what you're doing in that time.
Remember, one of the things they did was this culture survey in the program, and that wasn't out.
That doesn't take 3 months, though, right?
It took a month, so you're into June as opposed to May. But still, I agree. I mean, I don't understand what's going on, and something doesn't quite add up.
It adds up to being more disruptive if you make a decision to go in a different direction. As we get into the school year, it becomes a more disruptive thing. I mean, I don't know how much that matters in the grand scheme of things, but if you have the choice to not be disruptive, it would seem that you'll go that route, which begs the question again. I don't think they've just been sitting on their hands, but I have no idea, what it could be that they have been doing for the last couple of months.
I got a question for you guys.
Those
I got a question for you guys
questions.
before we go, Craig,
Great
before you
question.
start again. All right. Have you seen anyone in public, former players, other coaches, has anybody stood up for Mel Pearson in the last few days? I haven't seen a single person.
No.
Nobody seems. What's the hang up here? If it's not like you're gonna. The only thing I can think of, and I hate where this is leading me because it's just conjecture at this point. But the only thing I can think of is that powerful people want it to be hard to get rid of other powerful people for the obvious reason. And if you're in a position of power, you're in a position of importance, and you can see yourself in the same position where like, oh no, what if my mistakes ended up the same way? That's the only place that I think could possibly explain it.
Yeah, I hate to venture a guess on something like this, right? I mean, I just honestly, I have no idea. I have no problem saying I don't know. When I don't know things, I have no idea. And it may be that there's no justifiable reason. But I sure would like, I need to hear it. Definitely need to hear it.
Well, the question posed is completely legit. What have they been doing for the last couple of months? I would say that's a question that needs to be answered by the athletic department and Ward Manuel. Why, when you read the Wilmer Hale report, didn't you just can him then, after perhaps talking to Mel or a couple other people? Why did you? Those are fair. Those are completely fair and legitimate questions. I just hate to answer questions when I don't know those answers. I mean, it seems to me those are things that have to be answered by the athletic department and Ward Manuel, and not, maybe there are reasons. I don't know.
Well, an assistant SID posted on Twitter yesterday that he was badly mistreated by Bancroft and a guy named Ian. What's his name?
Ian Hume.
And that he should have stood up like Shields did. And so this is a guy publicly posting on Twitter, bombing the program. And it feels like a lot of people feel the same way, including one of the best goalies in the history of Michigan hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what's the upside?
I don't know. It would be nice if Strauss would have participated in this particular investigation, since he was sort of at the core of it.
Yeah, you can understand why though. He probably.
I completely understand why he didn't, but but I'm not criticizing him. But it would have been helpful for perhaps our understanding.
I mean, point blank, we have a recording that Steve Shields made of Mel Pearson that proves that he lied to these investigators.
True.
That is a firing offense. He's done. So make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
He's done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way you can talk about integrity in your athletic department if you keep Mel Pearson. And it doesn't take 3 months to know that. So I don't know what possible reason there is, but the report is public. Make your choice and move on. And there's only one choice. So what are we waiting for here? The man is out of contract. There's no downside. Just move on.
He's an employee at will. They don't need reasons at this point to not renew that relationship.
I mean, you don't need reasons to fire a coach anyway. You just got to pay his buyout.
Yeah. Right. But in this case, there's no financial downside. I mean, that I can think of.
All right, we need to get to a break. Be back on the other side. We'll switch gears. There are other things that are going on in Michigan athletics, right? So we'll get to those when we come back on the other side on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
Here's a question I got for you. How come Steve Shields kept the recording hidden? Don't you find that a little mysterious? If I was Ward, that sure would be something I would, because Shields talked about this meeting several times and never mentioned that there was a recording of it.
Well, he got Pearson to lie about it. He got
Pearson to lie about it.
It's like Alex Jones sitting on the stand and his lawyer's like, I have some news for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck, Alex. But I mean, I found that a little strange. I mean, in the end, the tape confirmed what Mel said. I mean, that's the other sort of weirdness of it all, is that when the tape is released, the tape says, confirms to what Mel said vis-a-vis his attitude was about Strauss-Mann. So I don't know, but yeah, you're right, Brian. He did seemingly lie about it, and Wilmer Hale thought he lied about it. That's probably a good enough conclusion for me.
You read the report and you see, like, okay, we need to. They're telling us to do more investigation to see where we should fire Mel Pearson. I read the report and it's screaming, "Fire Mel Pearson!"
Yeah,
and that the Wilmer Hale people are like, "This guy's got to go," and it's just like. I mean,
but oddly enough, the Wilmer Hale people did not say that.
They did. They didn't say it outright.
Right.
They said it in the way that you say it. When you're tasked to do a report like that, your job is not to sit and be like, okay, I'm going to make this decision for you, sir. It's like, here's all the information you need in all the context that you need to make your decision. And then you let the person who gets the report make the decithe
Yeah.
Not referencing any political things that have happened in recent years.
But anyway, so I don't know. The thing is weird to me. I agree with that Ward has some explaining to do. I certainly agree with that. I mean, it seems to me he's got to tell us what he was doing and why, and what was going on. Certainly by the.
I wonder why this rises to the level of a decision that you got to run by the president.
Yeah, it's the hockey coach.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one yet. But and again, that's just what we're hearing. It doesn't mean now this noise comes from people who are former hockey players, among others. But it's a fair question. Certainly, if nothing happens, certainly if it just keeps rolling on the way it's rolled on, it's extremely mysterious to me, beyond mysterious.
Yeah, so without obviously not giving up your sources, but what did those hockey players tell you what they think should happen?
The people, yes, none of them are supporting Mel. Let me put it that way. There's no one out there. There's no one out there that I've heard that's supporting Mel. I was told, I said, if you read the Wilmer Hale report, it seems to me that one possible construction is that Steve Shields was trying to get Mel fired and was on a long-standing, not maybe long-standing, but a year or two vendetta to do that, quote, vendetta. And the source that I told me said, yeah, he was. That's true. He was. And he was doing it for good reason. He was trying to save the program, and I thought, oh.
So where's Red in all this?
I mean, break.
I assume Red is supporting Mel. I assume, but I don't know. I mean, from the Wilmer Hale report, it sounds like that.
Maybe that's.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that. I mean, I suspect it's 100% legit and really de rigueur for Ward to be talking to Red.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how could you after the Wilmer Hale report? I think the first people I'd have in my office, aside from Mel, would be Red.
Yeah,
that's my fear. That's my biggest fear is that he thinks this is the Gary Moeller situation.
All right, here we go.
And we are back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Before we get back to talking Michigan sports, I want to remind you folks, you got that big project around your property. Work smarter, not harder. I learned that the hard way when it came to having to dig a trench in my backyard and put a French drain in because the freaking common area was dumping water with every rainstorm onto our yard. We dug that by hand. Why do that? You can go to Alta Equipment, rent a compact excavator. You can rent a skid steer to grade the yard like we did here most recently. Michigan's #1 construction equipment company with more products and more brands to serve your home and construction needs. That big project is a breeze. Michigan's #1 selection of compact excavators, skid steers, dingos, bark blowers, wheel loaders, and more. Nearly 50 brands to choose from. So don't go to some national chain where you get old machines and big prices. Call my friends at Alta at 844-GO-TO-ALTA. That's 844-GO-2 Alta, and let their experts get you what you need the first time at any of their 7 locations throughout the state of Michigan. We're back, folks, now, the MGoBlog Roundtable. So camp time is finally here. We are about to start hearing about position battles and how things are going in camp. You never want to get too carried away with it, but it is always an exciting and optimistic time. Set aside the quarterback position battle. Let's start the other way around with Seth because we've been probably hearing from you the least so far. So let's start with the position battle other than quarterback. Let's set aside quarterback that you're most intrigued by or excited by as we now head into, or we're in the middle or in the beginning part of this fall camp.
Oh, I want data on defensive end or edge, as it's called on the roster, or outside linebacker, whatever you're calling it. The first question is who can pass rush, right? Because when I was charting it last year, Upshaw could not get around guys. Harrell, he kind of just gets stuck on dudes, and he can't really doesn't really have the size to push them. The only guy who's really been effective is Morris, and he's more kind of like one of those dudes who pushes you into the quarterback. Not, he's got some strength moves, but he's not really going to be getting around dudes. The linebackers were really the best pass rushers they had. But if they want to stick to this 5-2 look, against 2 tight end sets and whatnot, then you're going to need guys who can rush off the edge. That's going to be extremely important. And I want to know what's going on there. Like last year, said it was Upshaw, and then he got passed by 2 guys. We haven't heard anything about McGregor. I know he came in with an injury, so like I want to see where that's at. Derek Moore, people seem excited about that. I want to see if that could happen as a true freshman. There's not a lot of things that look great right now, but if we start hearing some nice things, I'll eat it up.
They seem to have the requisite athleticism on campus, and the number of bodies. Makes you think like one of these guys can really emerge, but it's such a huge question mark. The guy that you point to amid all the questions would be Mike Morris.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the guy they seem to talk about the most. I thought Derek Moore was really impressive down at Under Armour. In an all-star capacity. He's physically ready to compete. Braden McGregor is my most intriguing guy because physically, I think he is the best combination of size, speed, and athleticism that they have up front. I'm more impressed with it, even though Julius Velshoff puts up better numbers. I just think that the learning curve game wise kind of skews the scales in favor of Braden McGregor, for me at least, being the most intriguing guy heading into this season at that position. Curious what you think, Craig.
At this juncture, I don't know. You asked me my biggest question, and that's inside linebackers. One, I don't see a lot of depth there. Two, I just watched the Rutgers game the other night, and they got shredded. They were going the wrong way a lot. And so, especially when Ross got hurt in that game and was out of the game. And so it was a debacle. And so I have a question about that position. I think it'll be better this year. I think Colson's a good player. I think we're more experienced perhaps at the starters, but I don't know what depth looks like there at all. On the outside, I don't think it's going to be the same in the sense that you're not going to have 2 elite pass rushers. But I think they should be fine against the run. And the question for me is whether they can compensate with getting pressure from the inside. And it looks like that may be plausible this year, or whether they can, they might end up blitzing a little more. I don't know.
Yeah, that's been the talk that all along. Jesse Minter sort of alluded to that back in the spring during interviews, like getting pressure a different way.
Yeah.
And the different way is with blitz pressure. But I'm curious. I mean, Brian, I actually go into this season thinking inside linebacker is a strength. Now that Junior Colson and Nakai Hill-Green have experience under their belts, that speed that we saw them running around with sometimes in the wrong direction. I remember George Hilo saying that to me last year before the season around this time. He said, Junior Colson can really run. It's just not always the right way, right? You got to feel like it's going to be the right way a lot more often this season.
Well, you do expect that, but it's potential and it's linebacker. So I have charted a lot of linebackers, and there are linebackers who get a lot better, and then there's some guys who just never quite put it together because it's a really complicated position. You got to have it. You got to have information processing ability, probably better than anywhere else on the defense, and it's hard. It's like, why was Tom Brady a 6th-round pick? Because people didn't appreciate his information processing ability. And I think linebacker is the spot, secondary quarterback on a football team, where that's the most important thing. So I think inside linebacker, you have a couple of candidates to really break out, but I've been burned before, Sam. And so I'm hopeful there, but I'm also going to be, I'm going to keep it reined in for a bit. But I do think
they need that position to be a playmaking position.
They do.
Those guys, if Michigan's defense is not going to fall off a cliff compared to last season, I think the linebackers replacing some of the playmaking ability that they got from the edge last year is a key component in that.
Yeah, and so I think Mike Morris just weighed in at 290. Is that accurate, Seth?
Mm-hmm.
So he's not going to be an edge rusher. He's going to be Chris Wormley, and that's a good player. That's a good player to have in your defense, and he's going to get 5 or 6 sacks over the course of the season. But who's going to drive that play? And I think Junior Colson is probably your best answer, unless you get a blow up at defensive tackle and you get someone who's imitating Mo Hurst, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So yeah, I agree with you. Getting playmaking out of those inside linebackers is going to be really important.
I do want to sing the praises of Nakai Hill-Green because that Rutgers game, that was bad. And they were doing things early in the season where like they had Josh Ross have to make the decision, and the other linebacker had to just do whatever Josh Ross didn't do. And that's a hard position in this defense, a harder position in this defense than it was in Don Brown's defense. Part of what Don Brown always wanted to do, in fact, was make decisions really easy for his linebackers so they could play faster. That was the whole concept of what he was doing there. And this defense isn't like that. This defense says, look, we're going to keep you clean, but you got to make the right call. Junior Colson was a true freshman. He, grew up in Haiti. He was not even supposed to be playable his freshman year. So there's a good chance that he's going to take that sophomore year jump. But like Brian says, it's a, that's a, and it also could be like Cam McGrone, where he makes a jump, but he's still not Devin Bush by any stretch of the imagination. But Hill-Green really seemed to pick it up as the season went along. And when I went back recently and watched the Iowa game, he is the one making those decisions that Ross was making before. So they put it on both of those guys. And when Colson got put in that position, he went the wrong way, maybe more often than not. But Hill-Green really seemed to pick it up and get more comfortable. So I'm comfortable with him starting for a season. I don't think he's going to be super flashy. Colson, I think, is their best pass rusher probably on the team. So I agree. Like this is the amoeba defense time. Now you have to recreate it in the aggregate, right? Throw Jeremy Giambi up on the board. That's the time we're at right now because you're not replacing Hutchinson.
What do you guys think about the depth at linebacker? Is that a concern at inside linebacker?
Yes,
is that a concern?
One of the most intriguing questions to me, and this is not my pick, by the way, but Khalil Mullings has been one of the better athletes at that position since he got here, and breaking through, just hasn't quite broken through yet. But I think he can be a big part of the depth at two positions. Linebacker being the primary position where he could be a key part of the depth. Is this the year where they feel, because you can't do it? You need more than two linebackers. Right?
Yeah, I think Khalil Mullings can be our short yardage back this year. And I was watching him in the spring game playing both ways, and that's a tough thing. But the play was going on when he was playing linebacker, and he wasn't moving. And this is year 3 for him, and I just don't see it happening at linebacker. But he showed some things as a running back, and I'd like to explore that.
Yeah, I think they will, and I think they will. But the one that I'm most intrigued about or by here in fall camp is, can Will Johnson's progression from spring to now be such that he's the guy coming out of camp? I think he's going to be the guy at some point this season. And that's the vibe that I keep picking. I picked up all spring. Is like he's going to emerge as the other corner. Maybe not to start, but looking at him this summer, hearing what some of the coaches and some of the other players are saying about him. I mean, I guess I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule out a fall camp, the kind of fall practice showing that could make him be the guy. Somebody watching that very closely. We know that he will be a part of the rotation from the jump.
I'm willing to make the bet right now that he's not going to start the opener, because who started in '95? It wasn't Woodson, right?
True.
And Marlon Jackson had to wait, but he was starting midway through the season. Donovan Warren was another very high star guy who was clearly better than the options that Michigan had. He had to wait till a third of the way through the season before he really took over. Leon Hall is another one who wasn't really playing until midseason, and they started moving guys around, moved Curry back and everything. So, that's how long it takes, right? Even if you have spring, even if Will Johnson,
which none of those guys did.
Yeah, which none of those guys did, but defense has also gotten more complicated since then as well, and especially Michigan's defense. Remember, we're not cover one and go anymore, right? This is a complicated defense that just added another coverage that they're supposed to have as their main base. So they're a switchable defense. They do cover 2 and cover 3 switches. They do man 0. They do a lot back there. And that's the reason Vincent Gray was, a good player for them last year. And they tilted everything towards what Vincent Gray could do because you had that organization back there. Now I think they're going to go more man this year because they can, but like that's
ordinarily
the level of complexity you're talking about.
I think you hit on a great point. And ordinarily, I wouldn't even be thinking. I wouldn't even think it was in the realm of possibility. Right, that you're talking about when you have a couple of experienced corners in Jamon Green and DJ Turner, who is one of Michigan's representatives down in Indianapolis, that you could have a freshman unseat one of them. But for them Will enrolling early, it wouldn't be. But he did enroll early and showed well and had those guys really like, man, he's going to be a guy. It probably is still most likely the case that he won't be coming out of fall camp. But, man, I do think now that it is a possibility. I think that is a possibility.
I assume they're going to run a third corner, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
against most offenses, you're going to be running a third corner or a combo corner safety. And I think there's a chance he might start at that spot. I don't think he's going to start at a.
Well, he said they have him practicing exclusively at corner. Now that might change during fall camp. That might change during fall camp. But he said they had him working exclusively at corner. So,
and that makes sense. And there's a lot of options that they have in that nickel spot right now. So, like, I don't think you need to add him to that mix because, you've got Moore who can play that position instead of strong safety. You've got Zeke Berry coming in. I'm sure they, they're going to get excited as soon as he gets on the field, right? John McBurrows was Jaden McBurrows was going to be, the guy there. I don't know how much he's back from his injury and whatnot. And, you can also play Mike Barrett there against more run teams. So, like, there's so many options to nickel. I would not complicate everything for Will Johnson right now, especially because he's just built so perfectly for outside corner.
So what do you guys expect from Mikey St. Ristel this year? Starting with you, Brian.
Oh, him too.
I don't know.
And here's why I ask. I mean, and look, I personally believe that, Dax Hill, you just can't get much better athletically in the history of the secondary than Dax Hill. There are some, of course, you can point to a guy like Charles Woodson, but Dax, as far as measurables are concerned, was a cut above all the rest. And yet, when they were talking about spring ball and just pure man-to-man cover skills and short area quickness, they were talking about Mikey St. Ristel like they think he's from a man-to-man cover standpoint, and you guys chart, they think that he is going to be that it's not going to be this precipitous drop there in man-to-man coverage. Now there might be some other places where it shows up a lot more as a blitzer in the run game. Maybe you'll feel it more, but they were talking like they felt like he would give them the coverage at that position that they were used to getting. I'm curious what you guys, if you think that's a too lofty an expectation there.
I mean, it does sound optimistic, right? Because St. Ristel was a wide receiver last year. He can practice for however long he wants in one offseason, and he's probably not going to be to the level that a guy who had been spending his career at that position would be at. So I feel like just getting to like decent would be a win there. And because it's a tough position to play because you got two-way goes on a lot of routes. You can't just set up and funnel someone to the outside if you're 6'2", which of course St. Ristel is not. So, the good news for St. Ristel is he's got a lot of ramp up before he gets to Talia Tungavailoa.
And which, man, they have it. Say what you want about Maryland, and for Tagovailoa throwing it right to the opposition, which he is known to do, they have a pretty good receiving core.
Really,
that Maryland receiving core is going to be one of the better receiving cores in the Big Ten. So that's going to be a
I
really
put
good
them
test.
number 2 behind Ohio State. I might even put them ahead of our collection of guys right now, because you've seen what Demas can do. Keem Jarrett is maybe one of the best receivers in the country, and they just added a guy from Florida who's awesome.
Yeah,
Like,
Copeland. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, they're gonna be fun because their defense is gonna be even worse than their offense is good. So it's gonna be a lot of.
Yeah, I want you guys to get your thoughts in on St. Russell, because I understand what the coaches are saying. It stuck out to me because the players were really raving about it too.
Yeah.
But what tempers my sort of enthusiasm about it is this dude is a technician. He is a technician, right? And he knows the scheme. Like he knows the plays. He knows how guys are trying to set him up on certain
He knows
routes.
our plays though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Plays. He knows our which I mean we've seen that before where like a guy's awesome in practice, then they play him, and then the other team doesn't run exactly what we run, and it's like, oh no. I don't want to knock Sainer still and stuff like that, but I think he's not going to be Dax Hill. Obviously, he could be Blake Countess, and he was. I mean, Virginia Tech had him coming in as a cornerback. They really liked him at that position. Mm-hmm. He was probably a higher ranked prospect as a cornerback, and that might be his future if he has a future beyond college. But I don't think you come in and I mean he's not going to be the same blitzer. He's not.
He's not going to be. I qualified.
You're not getting Dax Hill.
He's not going to be the guy in the box.
Right.
There's no.
What I come back
chance
to. What I come back to is there were a lot of sweatpants in the spring game. Rob Moore was in sweatpants. Jaden McBurrows was in sweatpants. Zeke Berry was in sweatpants because he was not on the team yet, right? So your 3 options that, if you're looking at who's going to be playing that position, your top 3 guys, minus Sainer still, were not even available in spring. And what happens when you get a position switcher and there's nobody else there? Everyone talks about the guy. We've been through that so many times. I'm not going to say that he can't play it. He might be penciled in as the starter at nickel at the beginning of the season. I probably would make him the front runner, yeah. But as for keeping the job all season, they have so many other things. Any one of them pops, he's kind of the guy who gets pushed out. Craig?
Yeah, that seems on the money to me. I think Sanders will be the starter in the first game. How long that lasts, given the other talent they've got, I don't know. But I think it's more likely than not by the time the first game rolls around, he'll be the starter at the nickel spot.
Yeah, it shall be interesting to see and to hear how things play out here over the course of the next couple of weeks. We always hear something, someone is breaking out, and then you want to see how it translates to the field when that opening game comes. But folks, that's going to do it for us today. I'll be out next week, but the crew will be back with Ira Weintraub and Matt the Miz Mizler. I'm sure we'll be in as well. So be sure to join us for another MGoBlog Roundtable at that point. Be sure to join us tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports, Ann Arbor, a Cumulus station.
And we are clear on the radio. Bye, everyone on internet.
See you guys. I'm talking about the online. See ya.